Thank you for joining us for our spiritual journey today. We've been going over a lot of very interesting reactions to the presence of God in our lives. Sometimes it's a denial, sometimes it's a hurt that a person has gone through in their relationship with God. But today, it's very different. Today's stage is, I don't need God, I will decide. And so instead of maybe denying God or rejecting God or being hurt by God or whatever it may be, the person takes the place of God. I think it's a very interesting move to be able to take the place of God. I'm going to decide for myself what rules I'm going to enforce in my life. I'm going to decide what I want to do. I'm going to decide who I am. I'm going to be my own God and make all the own rules. And there may or may not be consequences that I will enforce for the actions that I do or do not go along with. And so it's very interesting. So the place that we're at this stage is the place where God's love is ignored, His rules are dismissed. It's a place of rebellion and ultimately anarchy. When we become the source of the rules that we make in our own lives, it becomes a very capricious place, and we just start to suffer ourselves. There is a rejection of many or all conceptions of who God is or may be, because the self is seen as God, right? Satan, who says, I will not serve, I will decide who my God is, and that God is me. And all of us, I think, at one place or another, stage or another, we come to that place, right? Well, we come across teachings that are difficult, we come across conceptions of God that are difficult. How does a good God allow suffering to happen? How could a good God allow this, or why would a good God say this, or how could a good God render judgments in this particular aspect of life? Those can all be very, very difficult things for us as we begin to encounter a God who is ultimately mystery. And so the person that's at this stage is a person that likes to do their own thing. They're an independent person. There's a lot of pride going on here. No one can tell me what to do. I'm going to make the decision. I will decide here. And so there's a lot of pride that goes on here. There's an overly confident perspective about one's ability to judge and to judge rightly. I think that's very interesting, that we trust in our own ability so much that I believe that I'm God. And it's not enough for us to let God be God and let me be me. That's not enough here at this stage. Again, we go back to hurts and pains. Perhaps this person has been hurt in some form by God and doesn't see his words as relevant. Really trying to cling to be able to control the things that happen in my life, put up walls so that hurt and pain don't enter in. Sometimes that's what happens. Maybe this person has problems with a particular teaching of Jesus, decides to pick and choose his own belief system while trying to keep Jesus in the picture. So there is really this foundation that Jesus places before us, his teachings and the church that he formed and put together, and the disciples that he put in place. There's a whole kind of pick and choose. We could talk about cafeteria Catholics. They choose this but not that, choose this but not that, choose this but that, not that. There's a whole inconsistency here. And the only thing that's really consistent at this stage is that the person will do whatever he or she wants to do. And so it's something for us to consider as we have a conversation with a person who really doesn't need God, who becomes God themselves, doesn't look to God for meaning, purpose, plan, vocation, rules, flourishing, anything like that. I think it's really important for us to kind of think about and ask ourselves and ask the person, well, what is my conception of God? And then maybe other people reject that conception as well. Sometimes we view God as a capricious God who, does things randomly, or really doesn't care for his people, or is not merciful, or whatever the viewpoint or the perspective may be. For those who struggle with homosexual tendencies, how can a good God allow me to be created in such a way that I can't follow through with these desires, and unable to see the effects of original sin? It's really difficult. But to be able to, I think in all of these stages, to be able to open up the conversation instead of shut it down. So we open up the conversation. Can you tell me more about that? Can you tell me why you think that way about that teaching? Or tell me how, that has affected your life. And tell me why is it that you think this way? In a way that's non-judgmental and that opens up the conversation instead of just saying, hey, you should believe this or you're going to hell. God taught us this and this is what you should do or believe. That's not really helpful, I think, for most people. At whatever stage that they're at. So and the same is true at this stage. I think another question that we can ask ourselves as we put ourselves in the place of God, and I think any of us that are at any stage in our spiritual lives, we confuse ourselves with God. We think we can do anything. We think we can solve everyone's problems. We think we can make all the hurts disappear. Sound familiar? We think we're God. And we have to let God be God, and we have to let his creature, me, be his beloved son, or you his beloved son or daughter. And so I think it's something for us as we try to say, hey, these are all the right things, I'm going to make my own rules. I think we need to ask ourselves the question, historically speaking, how good has my decision-making process been? Really? Am I really the one that wants to make decisions and make rules and make laws when in the past I have a long track record of making bad decisions? And for us to ask ourselves the question, or maybe others, well, how'd that turn out for you? How'd that go for you? It's really helpful as we make bad decisions, we don't follow God's will. We're going to suffer the consequences because God always forgives. Man sometimes, nature never. And so that suffering is going to come because a lot of times our decisions are bad trees that produce bad fruit. And we suffer because of that. So can I trust myself to always make the right decisions? Should there be a good amount? What amount of self-doubt should there be there? I love the prayer of St. Thomas Merton. He says, he says that, Lord, help me to know that even though I think I am doing your will, it may not necessarily be so. I love that doubt that's in there. I think I'm doing God's will, but it may not necessarily be so. And so in our humanness, we consider how our shortcomings, how we're just riddled with them. And even in deciding to do God's will, there's self-doubt there. And so do I put so much trust in my own understanding that I'm going to be the one that makes the rules in the very short time that I've been here on earth and in my very limited experiences? I think that's just a tremendous amount of pride there. But to be able to ask the question, well, how has your track record been in making rules and making decisions? And if any of us are honest, we'd say, not that great. Considering the conception that we have of God, if God was caring, would I listen to him? I think so many times the perception of if God is a God that is distant or far away and, has to be bought off with prayers or fasting or whatever it may be, when that love and that grace is already being freely offered. So maybe in your conversation with a person that has just maybe a bad conception of who God is, if God was caring, would you listen to him? I think that's a profound question. And if God wanted me to flourish, would I care? I think so many times when we oppose our will to God's will, we think that what God wants for me is going to lead to my own self-destruction, is not for my own benefit. And so if God wanted me to flourish, and he does, even through the difficult and very trying things that we go through, would I care? Would I care about my relationship with him? And so it's something for us to consider this stage. I don't need God. I will decide that we put ourselves in the place of God in making rules and in completely ignoring what God's will is for our lives. And we indeed doubt God's very goodness, his indeed his very nature of being Father, and takes away our ability to understand ourselves as his beloved sons and daughters. So hopefully this was a helpful stage for you as we consider conversations that we have with those who put themselves in the place of God, and even ourselves when we put ourselves in the place of God, and you're like, well, I know better than God, I know better than the church that he established. And in pride, we don't acknowledge the limitations that we have as human beings. So next week we'll talk about stage open, a person who's open to investigating a relationship with God, and we'll see what that stage looks like. Until then, journey well. And thank you for joining us on our spiritual journey.